Hello, and welcome to LeaseQuery's Accountant's Angle, a podcast series where our experts answer your most burning questions regarding accounting topics and upcoming pronouncement changes. I am your host, Jason Parker, a Senior Alliance Manager here at LeaseQuery, and today I am very excited to be joined by Danny Martinez, who is a director in Cherry Bekaert's accounting advisory practice on the public sector. Now, today's podcast is going to focus on the new federal lease accounting standard, SFFAS 54. But before we dig in, Danny, welcome to the show. If you want to just give a little bit of a brief background on you.
Sure. Thanks, Jason, and thanks for having me. Like Jason said, I'm the accounting and advisory lead for our government and public sector practice. So what that means is that me and my team handle all of the implementation of new standards, whether it be for federal governments or for state and local governments. And so, as you can assume, I've been very busy with leases, whether it be GASB 87 or now starting with Statement 54.
Awesome. Yeah, I can certainly imagine myself, Danny, how busy you've been. And with SFFAS 54 specifically on the docket today, this is a sweeping change for accounting professionals. In the federal government specifically, I don't believe that there is an accounting standard quite as intense as SFFAS 54 in terms of a major change from a prior standard. And so what are one or two areas related to the adoption of SFFAS 54 that you think agencies should take note of as maybe a little bit more complex than you would maybe just think off firsthand?
So when you're thinking about the definition of a lease and what we're trying to do, we're saying leasing is financing, and we need to get this financing arrangement on the books. So we need a couple of things. One, we need how much we're going to pay and for how long we're going to pay. And I think one of the things that's been surprisingly more complex is determining what that lease term, that period of time actually is. Because within the statement, you're having to look at, okay, what is my non-cancelable period? And I'm going to need to be able to put that as part of my lease term. Okay, that makes sense. If I have a cancelable period where either party can cancel with a certain amount of notice, that is not part of the lease term. So people are like, okay, I can see where that would make sense if we're saying leasing is financing. But then you have this idea of renewals or termination options. So that's where either party, independent of the other, has the ability to either renew or terminate. And so with that, you're having to look at whether that renewal or termination option is probable. And so I see a lot of entities struggling with the whole idea of a cancelable term. Is it cancelable by both parties? Is it only cancelable by one party? How do I figure out if it's probable? And so that is one thing that I think, because people maybe have not been reading these lease agreements in that detail until this statement. One thing I think that they find is, oh, wow, I didn't know that either party could even cancel this lease in 90 days. We've been in this for 30 years. Or maybe the opposite. Oh, wow, I didn't know we were engaged in a financing arrangement where we're locked in for this many years. So I'd say that would be one area. And another one just to throw out there is when you need to, what you need to be looking at in terms of your lease agreements as far as when you're putting this thing on the books. And because it is based off of the facts and circumstances at the beginning of the period of implementation. So you have some of these leases that go back 20 years, and I see a lot of entities wanting to book the thing based off of what was going on in, say, 2005, 2006. But really, you're needing to look at the beginning of that period of implementation, what are the facts and circumstances of my lease at that time? So those are two things that I would say are more complex and where I'm seeing a lot more errors as far as implementation.
Yep, that makes sense. And I think even some of the state and local governments that we work with today, I think it's those judgment areas, like you mentioned before, trying to understand how likely you are to actually execute some of these options within the contract. That's where this gets a little tricky, because prior to the new accounting standards, they didn't really impact the balance sheet quite as much as they will now. So You obviously, Danny, helping organizations with, previously with GASB 87, but as you look to help agencies adopt SFFAS 54, why do you feel like agencies should consider leveraging a consulting practice, say like a Cherry Bekaert or any other consulting practice, just to help ensure that they create the appropriate processes for long-term compliance with the new standard, as opposed to, say, just trying to do everything they can to get the numbers on the balance sheet to start?
So, I went through one area of nuance there with the lease term and the optionality, and that's just like one area of the statement of many where there's nuances. And you referenced GASB 87. A large amount of statement 54 is built using the framework that we had from GASB 87. So a lot of the trial and error, a lot of the, in this scenario you do this, in this scenario you do that, I can, that's been done, and we've already kind of figured that out. So the good thing about the federal standard is there's a lot to learn from those that went before that is very applicable. So I was watching, not sure if you've seen this movie called 13 Lives. So it's an Amazon movie, and it's about that youth soccer team that got stuck in the cave. And so what happened, it started flooding, they got stuck in the cave. And these scuba divers had to kind of navigate the cave to go in and find and rescue the kids, right? And so they would go in and they would drop a line and tie the line out as they were going to the kids as far as they could go, fighting through the current, fighting through the narrow openings. And then they turn around. And then the next diver would go the next day, and they would use that line to help them navigate, to help them get there more quickly, and to go the next length down in the cave. And they kept going in this process until they made it, right? And so when I was watching that movie, it's kind of like what this is like. If you don't use some of the assistance as far as learning what other people have been to, it's kind of like you're doing that scuba diving without using the line, right? So it's like, why not just use it? And I guess the last point on this is, it doesn't have to be everything. The way that we, at least we in our consulting practice, line this up is we have a menu of options. Maybe you've got one thing nailed down, but you need help with another thing. Maybe you just need help with completeness, or you need help with your policies and procedures. There's a lot of different ways to co-source based off of the resources that federal agencies have, to make it work. So that's really why I think it's really important to leverage those that have gone before and have learned about the challenges with implementation.
Yeah, incredible analogy. I haven't actually watched it, but I do think my Prime membership renewed here a couple of weeks ago, so I'll make sure to add that to my watch list going forward. But on that same token, when we think about learning from others and not just the consultants necessarily coming in to step in and help, but your experience helping the state and local governments adopt their accounting standards, can you talk through just maybe one or two examples of valuable insight that you think federal agencies should learn, maybe from some of their peers in that state and local space? Just to remind the audience, the GASB 87 standard went into effect for fiscal years that began after June of 2021. So most state and local governments have already completed their adoption of GASB 87 at this point.
Yeah, definitely. And as you can probably tell in my voice, it's something I get a little excited about as far as talking about these ideas. I've probably done presentations like this. I mean, I've been doing this since 17, 18, just give an example. So what I want to do here is just give a couple things to conclude that are a little bit more actionable. And so the first one, federal governments are going to have a large volume of leases. So I'd recommend leveraging technology for completeness. A couple of things that I'd recommend is taking that GL dump of your expenses or of your revenues and combing them through a data analytics software to help pull out red flags of things that sound like a lease. Do you have 4 equal payments, 12 equal payments? Do you have a GL description of something that sounds like it could be a leasing transaction? So that would be one of the things that I do to help you identify some of the blind spots in your population. And the second would be to leverage text reading software to read the leases for you. There's a few good ones out there where you take your PDF document, 100, 200 page PDF document, you run it through this text reading software, and it pulls out some of the items that you're going to need to then input into a software like LeaseQuery. So, the lease term items, the lease payment items, termination options, renewal options. And now the one caveat there is artificial intelligence being what it is, it's going to get you 70-80% of the way there. That's still a lot of time when you're thinking about hundreds or even thousands of leases that these federal agencies may have. So you take that output and then do a spot check, or checking it on the human side, and to make sure that it pulled out everything that you needed. And then you would then take that information and input into something like LeaseQuery to handle all of the accounting. So I'd say that those are a couple of areas that I'd recommend as far as completeness and leveraging technology that I'd focus on.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I do think it's worth noting for the audience that LeaseQuery itself has invested in an AI technology to help scan lease documents, and more to come on the rollout of that technology in early 2023. So any of you on the federal side, chances are you'll be able to leverage LeaseQuery's AI technology when you move forward with an adoption utilizing the LeaseQuery software. But with that, Danny, I think that was a spectacular short bite conversation for anyone looking for a head start with SFFAS 54. Cherry Bekaert, for those of you joining us now, Cherry Bekaert, again, is a very strong partner of LeaseQuery's and is available to assist in an array of capacity with any federal agency looking to adopt SFFAS 54 coming up. But with that, that'll conclude our episode today. Thank you all for joining Accountant's Angle, and look for upcoming podcasts on other accounting topics, as well as more to come on SFFAS 54. Don't forget to subscribe too, so you can get our new episodes straight to your inbox. And with that, again, thank you all for joining, and we will see you next episode.